Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love just as Christ loved us and gave himself for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you there must not be even a hint of sexual immorality, of any kind of impurity, or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore do not be partners with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Brilliant, thank you. Natalie? Ooh, some big words in there. Right, let's have a look. There we are. Right, how are you doing? Not feeling terrified from that? So we've been looking at Ephesians, and if you have been looking at Ephesians, so in the Bible you've seen it's a tiny book, but we're still here weeks later, aren't we? Still going strong. It's a tiny book, but it packs a punch, don't you agree? So I hope you've been feeling really blessed so far, and also quite challenged, but in a good way. So we are looking at the book of Ephesians, and just to recap really, really quickly, because some of us have been there the whole time, and it's good to just have a little recap. Some have not been here. So the book of Ephesians is written by the Apostle Paul, and it's a letter written to the church in Ephesus. Ephesus was a big city, the epicenter of like cultural spirituality, paganism, the Greco-Roman gods. It's a very popular cultural center. But the Christians spoke a very countercultural message into this place. And we find Paul writing this letter from prison. He stepped on a few toes, I think. The first half of the Ephesians, I want us to just divide this book of Ephesians into two halves. So bear with me, think of it as like a little play. Act 1 is the gospel story. It's what we've been walking through in a few weeks, the belonging. By gospel story, we mean the belonging in Jesus. Jesus died for us. We are his children. We are loved. We are cherished. It's not by our works. It's not what we've done. It's the story that tells us that nothing can make God love us more. Nothing can make God love us any less. He will never leave us, never forsake us. This is a gift. And he's been given us a new identity in him. That is crucial. I want you to all just say to yourself in your head, I am a child of God and I'm dearly beloved. Just say that to yourself in your head. If we got that, we can move on to Act 2. If we don't, it's going to make all confusion and panic when we read things like this. If we don't understand where we belong, the second half is just a set of rules. But if we understand the first half, it can all make sense. And if you were here weeks ago when we did the Encounter series, we were talking about Paul, this writer, how he was called Saul back then, and he was a nasty piece of work. He was killing Christians. That was his good deeds for the day. How many Christians have I killed today? That was his sort of good deed. And then he had this amazing encounter with Jesus, who he was persecuting, on a way to Damascus, where he was trying to kill some more Christians. And he meets with Jesus there, and everything changes. He was a man who was of like a pedigree family. He was a law-abiding man. He was righteous in that way. He had a good reputation within his ranking and a good sort of position, but he had no love. He had no heart. He did not know God that he thought he knew. And so this change, this meeting with Jesus, changed everything. And in so many ways, this book of Ephesians is like Paul's story, but in all of our lives. Because we might not have had this lightning bolt meet with Jesus where we went, whoa, Jesus just met us and this is extreme, therefore I believe. It might have been like a slow kind of, yeah, no, I believe, or I've always believed, or it doesn't matter how we came to faith. The story is still the same. What Jesus did for us changes everything in our life, and therefore there should be a result that shines through from that. Paul is probably one of my favourite writers in the Bible. He is passionate. He lives out his faith, and this transformation that happened in his life is just evident in the way that he does his mission and lives his life. Paul is living in the light, and his life and his work reflects it. So the text today tells us that we are children of God, that we are children of light, and that our lives should reflect this. Because we've got Jesus in us, lighting our lives up, it should shine through into the darkness. So, you know, reading this made me think of these little stickers. I don't know if you had them or if your kids have got them. When I was little, I had these stickers in the ceiling that sort of absorbed all the light for the sunshine, or the lamp was just like filling these stickers. And when the curtain shut in the evening and the light was switched off and darkness fell, I could lie in bed and look at this starry sky. And as Christians, that's what we should be like. It doesn't matter. Their default setting is to just shine because the light is filled within them. That's where they're filled. So that's what we should be as Christians. That light should glow in the dark. When we face trials, when we face challenges, we know that we have this confidence, assurance that Jesus is with us. He is in us and shines through us. And there's some quite sort of examples of kind of very, very sort of strong examples in this text of how the light should reflect through our lives, really. There's a lot of things. I'm going to go through the list, you know. It says, not a single hint of sexual immorality. Not a hint. That's like not even in our thoughts, I guess, you know. There's nothing. There shouldn't be a hint of sexual immorality. I tell you what, that's quite hard in a world that we live in that defines fulfillment in life by how sexually fulfilled we are. Or we live in a world where we put on TV and everything is like, try before you buy, or test your relationship. Let's send these beautiful people on an island and see if they can cope with it. You know, how strong is your life? How strong is your love? All of these things. This isn't what God tells us to do. But let's be honest here. God invented sex. Let's not be prudent here. God invented sex. He said it's good. It's a fun thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful thing. He's just given us some guidelines here. How much brokenness comes through misusing this? How much pain, how much sadness comes from misusing this? God isn't trying to put down rules just for the sake of it. He's trying to do the best for us here. He's showing us the right way. Okay, greed. It's easy to sort of think of greed as a thing of those people, you know, those people who own their own jets and have their yachts and who own everything and doesn't share. It's easy to just think of them, isn't it, when we think of greed? But where is our heart? If God is telling us to give everything to him. I've met people in my life who's been super poor and extremely generous. I've met people who've been super rich and extremely generous. I don't think God cares really about the money in our bank account, but he cares about our hearts. Have we given God what he's owed? Is our bank accounts and our money and our finances part of what we give down for Jesus? In the book of Acts, all the new Christians gave everything they had to the mission of God for growing the faith. And we are, you know, grateful for that because it's spread to the ends of the earth. People would look at them and go, wow, they live differently. It gives us a bit of a cold sweat, the thought of giving up all our finances, all our money to everybody. which makes it a lot easier to look at the Old Testament model, which is like 10% of your first fruits, 10% of the best is what we should give to our church, to our community. That sounds like tiny in comparison, but it doesn't give us any specific numbers in the Bible. What it tells us in the Bible, and there's actually over 2,300 verses in the Bible on money and greed. So it does matter. It matters because our hearts are held back by it. It tells us that all of us needs to ask God what we should, in our hearts, give to the Lord. Let the Lord speak to us. Let us give those things to the Lord. So there's challenges for all of us. Then the next one, foolish, coarse, and obscene talk. How often do we just spread nonsense? We're not treating our colleagues well, or we're speaking behind people's backs, so we're not doing what we should do. All of these things, we should be lifting people up. We should praise people. We should help people. We can have the power to make a difference by our words. It says, don't participate in or be deceived by empty words. You know, we can speak truth into this world, or we can speak lies into this world. We can speak for our own defense and our own gain, or we can lift others up and we can make a difference. Drunkenness. I mean, all of the above comes under that, really. How much sexual immorality? How many marriages have broken down because of some drunken sexual immorality act? Or foolish and coarse, obscene talk. We don't bring our best out when we're drunk. Again, it's not a sort of, don't have a glass of wine. You know, sometimes people take it to the extreme. Jesus made, water into wine, and he made it plentiful. It doesn't mean we need to go and be all silly with it. Use the goodness and the amazing things God has given us in the right way. Foolishness. Foolishness is listening to all the advice that this world gives us and ignoring God's advice. Thinking that we know better, but God knows better. God is the author of our lives. He is the creator. He knows everything within us. He knows everything that goes on in this world better than we do. He's not a spoil sport. There's a myth buster. He gets this reputation of being a spoil sport, doesn't he? He just happens to know all the answers to our problems. He just knows the answers to our problems. He knows how we work. He knows how we can be our best, most fulfilled, most loved selves. That's why God is giving these things in place for us. But let's be really, really clear here. It's easy to sit and listen to these things and go, oh yeah, I know a couple of people who could improve a bit. You know, it's easy to think of other people with these things like, oh yeah, those people are really bad, and not put ourselves in this category. We have to look to ourselves. We have to be brave here. This is not a call. When it says exposing the darkness, it does not mean let's all go out and point our finger at all the people around us and tell people that are not matching up to the standards, that they're not matching up to the standards. This has sadly been the case, and still is sadly the case amongst Christians across the world. Not just Christians, but I'm talking to us as Christians right now. We go around and tell people where they go wrong. That is not our calling. That is not our calling. We can go and tell people that they belong, that they are loved by Jesus, and let them be convicted. Let us all be convicted of what we need to do right, but let's do it in love. It says, remember, Act 1, it says in Ephesians 2, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done. None of us can boast about it, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. And in chapter 5 that we're in today, in verse 13, it says, everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes light. It's amazing. Jesus knows everything we do. We can't hide anything. Jesus shines his light on us, and if we accept him, he will shine and will illuminate and use us, because that's what he does to every one of us. So we are to live as children of the light. We are to live the way Jesus taught us to live. A life of love. Put God above all earthly things living as dearly beloved children of God. That is the groundwork, and that is the reason why we would show this kind of fruit, that we would do things differently. But that doesn't mean that we are to be these sweet and cute and agreeable Christians. Sometimes that's put on us, like, oh, yeah, but you're a Christian, you should just agree with everything I say because you're lovely and nice. That's not true. That is not true. I think Paul is in prison here. I think he must have stepped on a couple of toes along the way. He did it in love. Love doesn't always mean people feel that it is love. It doesn't necessarily mean that, we're going to be in favour. Being a loving parent doesn't mean saying, yeah, just eat as much chocolate as you like. We know it's not good, so we don't let them. God knows what's good for us. So what does it mean then? What does it mean for us as Christians in our day-to-day life? Well, it might mean standing up against bullying in the workplace. It might mean refusing to cheat. On our exam papers, or maybe our boss told us to fill in some papers a bit favourably. Even if we lose our place of promotion, even if it has consequences, we are called to do the right thing. It might be watching the way that we speak of others, the way we think of others. It might mean speaking God's truth into a context that defines truth very differently and will make us stand out. It might be watching how much we drink and how we behave and how we speak foolishly, or how we behave sexually, how we spend our money, what we spend it on, and have we asked God what he wants us to do with the riches that he has entrusted us with. Now there's endless ways we can go deeper, that we can grow closer, that we can grow here, but there's also endless way that we're going to mess it up. And I can put my hand up and say, especially when I became a Christian, I remember the first sort of weeks and months of being a Christian and going through all of this. I had to literally lay down all of this. Absolutely. I failed on every single account. I can tell you that. Hands up. I don't think any of us can go, oh yeah, I'm nailing all of this. From birth, I have. It's not true. We all going to be challenged here and continue to be challenged. But it's where our heart is. Have we given it to God? But we don't take God's grace. God has given us chances. He loves us. We belong. It doesn't matter what we do. It does matter what we do, but God will still love us. That's what I mean. It does matter what we do, but it's not going to make us love us any less. When I got married to Chris, I didn't wait for him to sort of sign the agreement of for better, for worse, just so I can go, yes, I can do what I want now. I can take advantage of this because he promised me not to go. It's not how it works. We step into it because we know that we're loved. We step into that love and we pass it on. We pass it forward. But God does not love us less when we sin. He just wants the best for us. As a parent, like if any of my kids got sent in to a headmaster's office and they'd done something stupid or I'd been rude or something, I'd be upset. I'd be a bit angry probably, because I know that they can do better. I know that they've got more. I know that we've taught them differently. But I wouldn't kick them out of the family. They still belong. They're still loved. But I would sit them down and go, listen, let's talk about this. Let's find a way that we can do it better. Let's walk this through forward together. Let's take it back a step. That's what God does to us. He wants the best for us. He wants us to grow like a loving parent wants their children to grow. And he talks in this passage about God's wrath, God's anger. It's kind of terrifying when we hear of God's anger, isn't it? God's anger. You know what? I read one commentator describing it really well. He said, God's anger, it's when God says to us, okay, fine, have it your way. That's God's anger. Have you ever been in that place when you've had a friend or a child or whoever it is, and they just like persistently want to do something and you know it's going to be disaster, and it gets to a point where you just go, fine, just get on with it, just learn the hard way. And you have to bite your tongue when they come back in pieces, not to go, I told you so, because that's easy. Well, God doesn't say, I told you so. He just goes, I'm glad you came back. Let me show you the right way now. Let's do it together. I'm proud of you from learning from your mistakes. Let's grow deeper. That's what I've got for you. That is God's anger. God's anger is letting us have it our way. We think we know best, but we have to understand that God knows best. C.S. Lewis, who's been quoted here many a time because he is brilliant, he says this: there are two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and to those whom God says in the end, "Thy will be done." I know where I want to be. I want God's will to be done. When we come to the end of time, I want to know that I let him make the decisions. I don't want my own ways. I think I do sometimes, but I don't. God knows our best, and he loves us. We have to understand that all of God's advice, all of God's commands are for the very, very, very best of us. It's not rules for the sake of it. It's not to keep in power. It's not to be like the top boss. It's because he loves us. It's because he created us. It's because for generations we've, as human beings, made the exact same mistakes in different formats. And he's telling us how to avoid them, how to go deeper, how to find that confidence and love and assurance that he has for us. You know what? He commands us. This isn't even like, this is a command. It's not even like some gentle advice. He tells us we have to have a day off every week. That's good advice because we burn out, we get exhausted. We can't even keep that half the time, can we? I struggle with that sometimes. I'm like, I just need to get all these jobs done. It's telling us, rest one day a week. Just put it all down. It will be done. I think sometimes we've got this wrong image of who God is, and that's why all of these kind of advice and rules and all of these things feels overwhelming. Because if we have this image of God as this angry man in a cloud sitting there ready to zap everyone who goes wrong, then obviously it's just like rules and it's terrifying, and we just feel like if I made a mistake, I'm going to go down that route because that's my identity. Whereas God is saying, no, that's not your identity. Your identity is that you belong, you are loved, and you are cherished. So let's walk down that route. If you have this image of a God, an angry God in a cloud, then let me just ask you to shove that to the side, and I want you to just fill that space with Jesus hanging on a cross, nailed to a cross, suffering. For whom? For us, sinners, the sexually immoral, the lying, cheating, stealing, drunken, whatever foolish people we are. That is God, and that is love. And all the anger is taken on all the bad stuff, all the things that grieves his children. That is God's anger. That is God's love put in one place. Forget this cartoon image of God. That's not the truth. It's not what the Bible tells us. He knows us and he loves us. God shows us this amazing thing called grace. When we mess it up, we can come back to him and he will show us the way. Our job is to learn from our mistakes because God is creator of everything. He is the specialist of absolutely everything. So often we think, no, but I've got a PhD in... No, God has got like a whatever in everything. There is nothing he doesn't know that has been in the past, that will be in the future, that is at the present. Everything God knows, he understands, and he wants the best for us. We are, as this new identity that we've been given, we are the children of light. We are his, and we belong. Did you know that grace is one of the things that separates our faith from absolutely all other religions? In no other religion do you find the word grace. Grace is defined in Christianity. We've got like what goes around comes around in some faiths. We've got the karma and the, you can work your way up kind of level. And then in Islam, you've got the scales at the end of life. They put all the good things in one scale and God will put all the bad things in another scale. And then it just depends where it tips. And I mean, fair dues. That's kind of how we live our life in the world. The good against the bad. And then we've got Christianity that goes, I've given you everything. Whether you reject me or not, I will give you the opportunity to have it all because I love you. That is grace. Grace is a uniquely Christian distinctiveness, and it's powerful. Grace is forgiveness, salvation that we have not earned, that we do not deserve. It's a gift. And that's why we know that we are loved. We know what we've been given. So we trust and love God and move with him. As a child, you are his representatives here on earth. Not only will you benefit greatly from following God's word and God's will, and be able to shine your light into other people's lives and let them take part in this beauty as well. And it says in verse 19, instead, be filled with the Spirit. Sing and make music from your hearts to the Lord. You know, when we worship together, it was lovely having the whole band here today. When we worship together, we are reminded of who God is, of where he should be placed in our lives, of who he is. And when we do it together, we're also reminded that we're not alone. We're not alone in this. We are together. I mean, there are thousands and millions of Christians around the world. We are not alone. But let's be honest as we finish. Let's just be honest about this isn't just easy. Loving God and showing God's loving way is not going to be a popular way. It isn't a popular way. You might stick out. It might be hard. But Jesus is and always has been very countercultural. We see that clearly in this society that we live in, which is all about me and my first. Me and mine and everything that works for me first. And then we'll sort of tip the rest off if we can. It wasn't easier for Paul. He lived in Ephesus, which was like, he's writing to Ephesus. He's living in a culture where the pagan worship was like flourishing. Sexual immorality, greed, and drunkenness was like revered as the way to do things. That's how you worshipped in those days. No, it's not. He's in prison. And if you read Acts, he gets stoned a few times. He even gets up and continues his work then. It's not harder for us, but it is hard. But we have God within us, and we have his assurance. If we ask ourselves honestly, what areas of your life have you not given to Jesus yet? What challenges do you face in your day-to-day life or in your inner being that you know you need to speak this new identity into and not just cling on to the old, not just cling on to your own? We have many hats to fill in this world. You know, in our work settings, you fill that role as a parent, you might fill that role. We know what's expected of us. We know how to live things out. And it's the same as Christians. We know that we are children of God, that we belong. And that light should shine through us. There's no difference in that. As a child of Jesus, our light should radiate through us. And I want to just finish with this prayer that is in Ephesians 4, which I recommend you pray over yourselves, over your family, over your friends, over your enemies. Pray over anyone. I love this prayer. It says, I pray from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand all of God's people should, as all of God's people should, how wide, how long, and how high, and how deep his love is. Amen.